Owen's here with the business then. We're going to start off talking about China. A huge sea change in banking, which is on the cards there, isn't it, Owen?
Yeah, very much so. China has some of the richest banks in the world, Stuart. We're talking banks with assets, profits of tens of billions of dollars, but they're also some of the most restrictive, particularly when it comes to allowing outside foreign investment as is much of China, despite the fact that it is opening itself up to various brands, well-known brands investing in the country. It's one of the most far-reaching shake-ups of recent times. We should be able to cross to our correspondent, Henry Morton. No, I'm told we can't get Henry yet. I'll just keep talking some of the details through, Stuart. Essentially, the Chinese Prime Minister, Wen Jiabao, wants to bring foreign investment into the country, make it a little bit easier to invest. At the moment, the likes of you and I can't really invest in China. Most companies have some fairly restrictive practices. We can cross to Henry Morton now, our correspondent in Beijing. Hello, Henry. A few technical difficulties this morning, but we have got you at last. Henry, just give us a few more of the details of this reform in banking. There's quite a lot on the cards, and it's fairly far-reaching stuff.
Yeah, well, two statements really coming out of Beijing in the past couple of days, one slightly more official than the other. The first one is the Chinese government saying that they were going to increase the amount of money that foreign institutional investors could invest into the Chinese stock market. They're raising that to $80 billion. And that's seen as a way of trying to stabilise what's been sort of a fairly volatile period in Chinese share trading. The Shanghai Composite Index losing 20% last year. The idea behind trying to bring in these foreign institutional investors is to try and get rid of speculation that we've been seeing in the past couple of years and trying to get in more money in from people that have, say, a slightly longer term vision of the way that the Chinese market is going to proceed. The second thing that we're hearing, the slightly less official changes that we're looking in the banking sector, came from an interview that Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao gave yesterday, saying that he wanted to see the monopolistic practices of China's big four banks broken up. Basically, almost all financial services that occur in China are dominated by these four banks. That's seen as extremely bad for growth because they tend to only lend to large state-owned enterprises because the government guarantees those loans. There's a lot of small businesses, a lot of medium-sized enterprises that find it extremely difficult to get any form of private investment. And that's a situation that needs to change because the private sector, these smaller and medium-sized businesses are the ones that are seen that are going to try and help China get out of the current sort of slowdown that it's seeing, and also to sort of spur growth in the sort of medium to longer term.
Henry, just very briefly, I mean, it seems quite difficult, doesn't it, to have the discussion without addressing the thorny problem of China's undervalued currency. Doesn't sound so simple if you do that, does it?
No, but the statements that we're seeing coming out of China at the moment are seen as a way to perhaps actually start to address those problems. The Chinese government has been keen for a long time to try and shift emphasis away from the US dollar as a global reserve currency to the yuan, but the way that the control system works within the Chinese economy, it's extremely difficult for that to happen. The government now looking as if it's trying to sort of free up the economic sort of mechanisms that work within this country, and that, by many analysts, is seen as a very large stepping stone in order to try and make the yuan more attractive as a global reserve currency.
Thanks, Henry. That's Henry Morton in Beijing. We heard him, even if we didn't see him. Now, we're going to have to wait, in fact, to see how Hong Kong and Shanghai react to those reforms, because those markets shut, in fact, for a public holiday. What's happening elsewhere, Owen? Yeah,
as Henry said, the Shanghai Composite had a very bad 2011. The Nikkei is supposed to be having a very good one, at least until today, losing around 2.5% there. As Stuart says, low volumes across Asia because of those public holidays in Hong Kong and mainland China. Big surprise of the day, perhaps, the ASX in Sydney having a very rotten trading day. That's largely because the Australian government has recorded a trade deficit for the last month, around $480 million in deficit. That doesn't happen a lot to the Australians. That country was, if you like, the big exception to the global economic crisis, sailing through when every other economy in the West, it seemed, was on the verge of imploding. So pretty bad day all round there.
Now, next, a screen break for James Murdoch. Running his father's UK satellite broadcaster was Murdoch Jr.'s most prized role, but he's been forced to quit. Proof the UK phone hacking scandal is continuing to cause ripples in the News Corp empire and beyond.
His resignation was seen as inevitable. James Murdoch had been under months of pressure from shareholders to step down as chairman of BSkyB and was afraid his staying in office any longer would jeopardise the satellite broadcaster's future.
I think there's a simple explanation, but it's difficult to run BSkyB if you're based in New York. But also, I think it's much more about trying to separate the connection, to sever that link between News International, which James Murdoch has been in charge of until very recently, with BSkyB, of which he was also chairman.
At stake, BSkyB's broadcasting licence itself. British regulator Ofcom is currently investigating whether the company is fit and proper to hold one. BSkyB lost more than £1 billion in market value last summer after Rupert Murdoch's bid to take full control of the firm fell through because of the news of the world's phone hacking scandal. 39% of the company is now owned by News Corp, the rest by shareholders. A British parliamentary committee is expected to announce its findings about the case soon. A separate police investigation is also underway. Though James Murdoch has maintained he had no knowledge or involvement in the scandal, he would be held responsible as former head of News Corp.
At the very least, they're going to say he may not have known, but he really should have done. So he's either a knave or a fool. And the problem for James Murdoch in that sense is that he's chairman of a public company, BSkyB, 61% owned by people other than News Corporation, and his position clearly starts to become untenable.
With Murdoch's resignation, BSkyB's shareholders will be hoping it can move away from any perceived connection with the scandal.
Next here on the Business Show, it's definitely not a bird, it's not really a plane, and it's not really a car either. In fact, it's probably a little bit of both. A new prototype flying car is going on display at the New York Auto Show. It's seen as the perfect accessory for the time-pressed executive. The question is, will it take off?
It's called the Transition, and for good reason. 1 minute, it's a private jet flying at 1,400 feet. The next, it's a gas-efficient car getting 35 miles to the gallon. Once upon a time, sci-fi cartoons imagined the flying car. Today, engineers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology have built it.
I think it's an airplane.
A car. It looks like an airplane. A flying car.
It looks like a plane, but I think it could be both.
The vehicle's creator has an answer.
As we like to call it, it's a street-legal airplane. An airplane that can fold up its wings in less than a minute, drive down the roads and on highways, and park in a single-car garage.
Anyone hoping to drive the car needs to log 20 hours of flying time and complete a sport pilot's license before taking to the skies.
You have flight controls, a stick and rudder pedal to fly, and you have your steering wheel to drive. You have a gas pedal and a brake pedal while you're driving. You have a throttle in flight. And this is your shifter, so you have forward, neutral, reverse, and propeller.
Though not yet available, there is already a waiting list to buy the $279,000 Transition when it hits the road.
As you heard there, Stuart, about $250,000 if you want one of those. 100 people apparently have already put down a deposit for $10,000. The thing is, you do need a runway for this. So It's not as if you can just zip down the streets of New York and then suddenly take off. That's perhaps one for the successor.
Fantastic stuff. Image of the day. That's it from us. More news coming up really shortly. Stay with us.
Murdoch believes the more of our world we see, the richer we become. Fly Emirates. Hello, tomorrow.